today is a hippie holiday. It's both a day which in the Soviet Union was celebrated as the Day of the Rights of Children, and of course the local hippie said, well, we are children, we are flower children, so this is our holiday. But also today is the day when on the 1st of June 1971 there was an attempt to have a big hippie demonstration like hippies in America against the Vietnam War, and it was brutally crushed. People were arrested, at the time registered and sent to prison for 2 weeks, but in a year later a lot of the men were collected and sent for 2 years to the Chinese border to serve in the military. And it also signified a sort of time when hippies in the Soviet Union were more persecuted. However, ever since then, hippies have marked this day as their holiday and as their day when they came together to have this demonstration and show who they are. So we are here together today. Usually all these people would celebrate either in Moscow or Lviv or Riga, but today they're here, and they're here because this is the culmination of a very long collaboration between me and the museum and the people who are here who have so generously given their archives. And it's their archives you see here. So every single person here you will see in the pictures as they looked like 40, 30 years ago. So they can later on, you can ask them who they are so they can identify themselves. This is supposed to be a happy evening, so I will not bore you with long announcements or words of gratitude, even though I'm very grateful to everybody here in the museum for having made this possible. I'm basically the academic knowledge behind the exhibition, but I couldn't have done any of that, obviously, without the people helping in the museum and obviously without the people who are here. And I'm really glad. This is for me very much the culmination of my work, which I always wanted to be a combination of creating history, of writing history, but also in a certain way producing history. And I always feel that the subjects of our studies very much belong into our studies, and I cannot say how grateful I am that today we have managed to have everybody here and sit here and give us their opinion and be part of this exhibition. So I'm going to introduce people and ask everybody one question, even though everybody can tell and talk about their lives for hours, and I know this because I've taken interviews from everybody here. And some of them have lasted for several days, some of them have been going on for years in many ways. But I have told them they can only answer shortly, because and we also would like to hear what kind of questions you have. So we'll have one round of questions where I ask people, and then the floor is open to whatever you would like to ask. And we have a great translator who's going to translate questions and answers. So my first question, and I always introduce people as I ask the question, my first question is to Sasha Penanen on my left, who actually will answer in English, because Sasha was expelled with his wife Svetlana from the Soviet Union in 1975, and after a long odyssey via Rome and some camp in the southern half of California, he ended up in fact living in Los Angeles. Now he lives in San Francisco. And he really was one of the first in Moscow, one of the first hippies. And my question to him is, can you tell us a little bit about how did it happen that hippies became a phenomenon among children of the elite? Because really, the first hippies in Moscow, they were all children of very eminent party people, or people who were in the KGB or in the military. And you would expect that these children would behave in a conformist way, but on the contrary, these were exactly the children who rebelled. You can sit down, but you have to speak into the microphone.
Oh, right.
You can sit down, or do you want to stand up?
Doesn't matter. I don't know how to, how to condense all that stuff. At the time, none of us knew that the kids that came from so-called elite, because it wasn't such a category, it's a common thing. But in time it became known that, simply why lots of kids came from KGB families or military, high-ranking military families or whatever. Oh, okay. The reason is very simple, because kids in those families was the most informed about what's been going on around the world, living behind the iron curtain. That's sums up the whole thing.
So your wife, for example, she was the daughter of the curator of the Museum of Lenin and Red Square. And it actually was her who you two ran together kind of salon where people would come every evening and hang out. And tell us a little bit, what was it like to be a hippie in Moscow at that time?
But one thing, we didn't use the word hippie because we didn't know the origin of it. So how we can use it without, proper translation.
So what did you use?
People. It was people who wasn't in so-called system. They were simply non-people.
So I should say that the word system, sistema, that is already a term which was coined in Moscow among the hippies as a word to identify themselves. And it's very interesting because that really is a speciality of the Soviet hippies, that they formed the sistema. And it really became huge later on. At the time of Sasha Benanin's time, it was mostly limited to Moscow.
It was just happening automatically. We agreed with my ex to sort of unconventional lifestyle. We called it social experiment of two in parallel lives. So, meaning not sticking your nose into others, the personal life too much. And evidently it becomes so attractive to our friends, temporary or permanent, and there is more and more people been clumping around, and it becomes snowballing automatically. More and more people start to come west, and it becomes a politician. Then it was the slang being developed, which also being spontaneous thing. It's not anything deliberate. So it just was come quite naturally. And then we had no other way out of it. You just make lots of coffees and lots of cocktails and lots of tea. And by the end of the day...
And also some other things.
Yes, well, don't forget the joint, of course. Not medical marijuana, a little better. I wouldn't advise to drive. But by the end of the day, literally by the end of the day, figuratively speaking, you usually get positive, I'm going to drop dead, and there is no way in the world I'm going to wake up. But I'm still here because I did wake up.
We'll come back to that topic later on. So my next question is to Yoko, Veronika Milochina. The photos you can also see dotted around. And she came into the hippie system a bit later, when Sasha had already left. But unlike in the West, where most of the famous hippie names bound up with male names, Jerry Rubin, Abby Hoffman, etc., there were actually quite a lot of really famous women in the Soviet hippie system. And Yoko and her best friend Ophelia were some of them. And my question to her is, what was it like to be a woman in the Soviet Union as a hippie?
Женщины-хиппи, было то же самое, что и мужчины, собственно говоря, у нас не было разногласий.
To be a woman hippie was basically the same as being a man hippie.
Но на самом деле были еще девушки, действительно выдающиеся, как Офелия, как Света Конфета, но это позже уже, да, на поколение, наверное. Они были очень интересные. А вообще, что я могу сказать, как было быть девушкой хиппи? Наверное, так же, как и мальчиком. Также по трассам ездили, также, собственно говоря, брали на себя какую-то ответственность. Детей рожали, детей рожали.
I don't see...
А с детьми случилось все
I don't know about much difference between being a man hippie and a girl hippie. Of course, there were remarkable girls hippie. For example, Ophelia or Sveta Konfeta. But otherwise, it was the same life. We traveled along, we traveled across country, we took the responsibility, we were active. Of course, girls had to give birth. That was a difference.
Was it difficult then what did you do? Did you travel with children, or what happened to the children? What happened to the hippie children? Were there communes like in the West?
А что с детьми происходило, когда он приходилось путешествовать? Вы что, брали с собой? Была коммуна?
Кто-то брал детей с собой, кто-то оставил.
Yes, some people took their children with them.
Кто-то брал детей с собой, а кто-то оставлял родителям, да?
Others left their children to their grandparents.
А что? Ну,
Oh, what else?
Okay. So we are traveling now from Moscow to Lviv, to the person next to me, Alec, who actually became a hippie. Какой потом будем стать hippie?
Ну, можно сказать, с самого детства, а в 72-м уже поехал в Брistol.
So I'm even interpreting a little bit. I know Alec was born a hippie. So that's but from about, and as he will tell us, he actually, in fact, it was California hippies that made him a hippie, but he will tell us now in detail of how it came that he got inspired to become a hippie in a town that was far away from Moscow in the very west of Ukraine.
Ну, можно так сказать. Впервые я прочитал в журнале «Вокруг света», это в Советском Союзе был такой журнал, Генри Боровик описал Сан-Франциско, как зарождалось движение хиппи. Это было в сентябрь 68-й, он описал про 67-й год. Мне тогда 10 лет было, я был ребенок, прочитал, увидел фотографии и воодушевился увиденным явлением.
I was about 10 years old when I read an article written by Henry Borovik. It was published in the Russian magazine Around the World. It was published in September 1968, but it was about what Henry Borovik saw in 1967, and it was about the San Francisco hippies.
Но перед этим, можно так сказать, история моя была такая. В 7 лет, у меня мама болела сильно, и в 7 лет она умерла. И меня отец дал в интернат. И в 1 и 2 класс, это 7-8 лет, когда мне было 7-8 лет, я учился в интернате.
But what happened before was also important. I was about 7 years old when my mom passed away, and my father left me at the orphanage. And so I took my first and second grade at the orphanage. I was 7 or 8 years old.
Ну и впервые я столкнулся, можно сказать, с жесткостью, жестокостью взрослого поколения, можно сказать, моих, как бы сказать, учителей, или, как сказать, в интернате, когда раз в месяц приходил парикмахер, мы все вот так вот сидели, как сейчас, он проходил и всех мальчиков стриг, только чубчики такие оставлял. Я заплакал, истерика, я не хотел, чтобы меня стригли просто, не то, что, я не хотел насилия над собой. И я тогда убежал с интерната к себе домой, и у своих ровесников и старших парней прятался на чердаках. Милиция города уже меня искала, это, считайте, мне 7-8 лет было. И через неделю меня все-таки увидели и сказали, чтобы я назад в интернат не стал.
It was there at the orphanage that I first confronted and was face to face with the adults' cruelty. Because once a month there was a barber who came to the orphanage to cut the hair of the boys. And the cutting of the hair was very uniform. Everybody had to have the same cut with locks cut like this. I didn't want that, and I ran away, and I was hiding in the attic of a friend until the policeman found me.
И потом история продолжилась. Когда мне уже сдали с интерната в такую школу обычную, мне было 9 лет, 10. Соответственно, были разные неприятные моменты в истории с учителями, и я не хотел слушаться их. И у нас было такое, что в Советском Союзе были детские комнаты милиции, воспитания. И я уже в 10 лет мне поставили на учет как трудного подростка.
At that time, the next few years were also difficult, even though I wasn't in the orphanage anymore. I was in the regular school. However, I was still a rebellious child. I didn't want to listen to the teachers, and at some point I was registered as a young delinquent in a special room where our police officers had special rooms for young delinquents. So I was registered there. It was called Children's Room.
И чтобы вы себе представили, со всего города Львова брали трудных подростков, ну таких хулиганов с разных районов Львова на перевоспитание. Я был 2 года, это 68-69 год, Драгобич и Равануська, наши города возле Львова.
And then for 2 years, I was taken from Lvov, the city where I grew up, to Dragovich, into a special colony of what was called difficult children. Those were boys who were rebellious, but also were thieves, bullies, and they were called difficult children. So among them, I spent the next 2 years of my life.
So one of the most interesting aspects, of course, of Soviet hippie life is whenever you encountered Soviet authorities. And I know you have another interesting story to tell, because hippies were pacifists and they did not want to serve in the Soviet army. And the way out from serving in the Soviet army is to declare yourself crazy. So are they going to tell us of how he managed to do that?
Да, это верно, что многие из наших друзей, никто, в принципе, в армии не служил. И были, как бы сказать, отказ от службы в армии. А это как? Ты приходишь на военкомат в то время, вот я пришел, вы себе представляете, вот так, разрисованные, как индианцы, а военные, милитари советские, ты что, crazy? Я говорю, ну я не знаю, психдиспансер. И я потом целый месяц лежал в психиатрической больнице. Соответственно, это было ненормальное явление для Советского Союза, что ты на пол разрисованные какие-то лица. И после выхода с Crazy мне дали такую статью 7Б, это психопатия. И меня в армию не брали. Также мои друзья, допустим, если ты режешь себе руки, это также считалось, что ты хочешь покончить как бы самоубийством. Тебя также Crazy и в армию не брали.
Yes, that's true. Most of our friends did not serve in the Russian army. How did it happen? Well, you came to the military registration office where all the young boys had to go to register, and you would draw paintings on your face, and you would also put your hair, long hair, into the blocks, and then the military would not be used to seeing young people like this. They would ask you, "Are you crazy?" And we would say yes. And that was one way of getting out of this. Another way was to cut your veins. That was another way of getting into what was called the mentally ill category.
So the real aim of the hippies, however, was to get as far away from the authorities as they could, and they did this by creating their own spaces in their apartments, or also by traveling, because when you traveled in the Soviet Union, you were a little bit underneath the control system. So what really made the Soviet hippie systema, what they called themselves the systema, was actually extensive travel, especially in the summer months, and that is how they all met each other. And Lena, who is also from Moscow here, has been an extensive traveler. I know that because we have her pictures, and she has been on freight trains and in sunflower fields, and I know she had some adventures in Ukraine, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her travels.
Ну, у нас каждую весну всех звало в дорогу, потому что тепло, и всем хотелось в дальние края повидать своих старых друзей в разных городах по всей стране. Вот. И мы собирались довольно легкомысленно в эти поездки. Самое главное было взять с собой какое-то одеяльце или что-то такое. Но я могла уехать на 4 месяца в постановщиков в платье.
So every springtime, there was this inspirational call to go travel, to see your friends around the country. And we did not prepare for those travels very well. I, for example, could go for a 4-month travel just wearing slippers or without even taking a blanket with me.
Ну, обязательно мы собирали адреса, потому что хиппи, система, она была огромная, от Прибалтики до Улан-Удэ. До Дальнего Востока.
What we did prepare was the books of addresses of our friends throughout the country, because the система, existed throughout the country, from Far East to the western part of Europe, from Pribaltica, the Baltic countries, to the south.
Вот. И, например, путешествие вот с Гулливером началось в Самарканде, когда мы встретились, он сказал, поехали на Байкал.
So my travel with Culver started in Samarkand, which is Uzbekistan, and he said, why don't we go to Far East? And I said, why not?
У меня было 15 рублей,
I only had 15 rubles,
коробочка с бисером,
a little box with pearls,
зубная щетка,
toothbrush,
мы платим босоножками.
one dress and one pair of slippers.
Но по пути мы заезжали, то есть ехали автостопом, в Средней Азии проблем не было, потому что тепло и везде кормили. Но мы заезжали в горы, мы объехали весь Иссык-Куль, то есть не просто ехали, но обязательно куда-то уйти в горы, высоко-высоко. И здесь еще был момент испытать себя, что-то преодолеть. Вот, то есть цель ставилась, допустим, перейти с Иссык-Куля в Алма-Ату через 2 перевала.
So it was, we traveled through the eastern part of the Soviet Union, but part of this travel was also the trip of self-discovery and overcoming your own weaknesses, and it was like a challenge. We didn't just travel from one city to another, we sometimes traveled through mountain chains in order to get from one city to another, just to prove ourselves.
Но в Алма-Ате мы приходили, там были друзья, и мы, и я, и Гулливер, мы шили, и там обшивали знакомых, незнакомых, зарабатывали деньги, ехали дальше. И так мы ехали 4 месяца до Байкала с остановками в Красноярске, допустим, из города Саразек, там ничего не ходило, кроме поездов, и мы ехали уже на товарном поезде, в железном вагоне через пустыню.
So when we went to Alma-Ata, both Culver and myself, we were tailors. So we could sew dress for hippies. So that's how we made a little bit of money among our friends, by making dresses for them, special clothing of hippies. And then we boarded cargo trains, because we didn't have money for regular trains, and we went for 4 months like this, traveling around, and including the Far East.
So how did people, what did people say to you, normal Soviet people who saw you traveling, how did they relate to you?
Ну, у меня проблем не было с людьми, обычно, мы представляли, что вы студенты. Отстали от экспедиции.
I didn't have any problems with other people. We usually presented ourselves as students, as if we were left behind after an expedition, like a science expedition.
Иногда милиция даже нас подвозили в гостиницу, чтобы мы там устроились как-то. Но мы, конечно, сбегали и ставили палатку где-нибудь у реки.
Sometimes even the police officers would give us a ride, for example, to a hotel, so that we could take a sleep there. But of course, we would run away from that hotel. We usually use our tents to set up somewhere in the forest.
Еще такой момент, то есть парень с девушкой и как бы, пара, да? И я обязательно носила обручальное кольцо. Чтобы все думали, хотя в паспортах у нас не было штампов, но чтобы все думали, что мы же жена, и это как бы работало. Даже милиция не обращала внимания.
Well, because we were traveling as a couple, a man and a woman, I usually pretended that I had a wedding band, even though we didn't have any registration in our passports because we were not married. But seeing just the wedding band was enough for people to just leave us alone and assume that we were married. Otherwise, it would be a problem.
И в основном нам люди помогали, когда у нас... Но бывали случаи в Сибири, в какой-нибудь деревне, мы оставляли всю еду, которая у нас была, какой-нибудь бабульке, которая у нас в дом.
Usually people helped us and they treated us kindly, and sometimes we actually treated them kindly too, because once we left all our food that we had on us to an old lady who allowed us into her house when it was raining cats and dogs outside.
Но самая главная идея вот наших путешествий было это доехать, например, до Байкала и обратно без денег.
But the main point and the main challenge of our travel was to go, for example, to some interesting place like the Baikal and without any money. That was the point, how to get there without paying.
И, например, ну, автостопом понятно, в основном мы ехали на дальнобойщиках, на КАМАЗах, иногда по несколько дней, но иногда, когда невозможно было совершенно поймать машину в Сибири, там, на Алтае, например, мы ну, залезали в поезд, просто вот залезали и ехали до упора, пока нас оттуда не ссадят.
So usually, of course, how did we travel? We usually tried to travel by auto stop, and people would pick us up and give us a ride. Mostly we traveled in big rigs, as long as they could take us, as far as they could take us. And if there were no cars, as happened to us, for example, in Siberia, we would simply board a train without any tickets and just ride that train until we were picked up.
Ну, в общем, много всего было, много приключений, но в основном очень хорошие воспоминания, потому что очень хорошие люди встречались, необыкновенные, в основном все помогали.
Obviously, we had a lot of adventures. It was a very nice time, now that I look back at it, and mostly people helped us.
So now we're returning from Lake Baikal back to Moscow, because there were many ways how you could experience so-called kite as a hippie. Kite really was your goal, your identity, your everything. That was what made Soviet hippies, and it's a very hard to translate word, and I'm going to turn to Natasha Mamedova, who I know loves music, and music was one way of achieving kite. To say if she can explain a little bit about what it means to have kite.
Я хочу сделать небольшое введение, чтобы вы понимали. Система хиппи, она разделялась на несколько тусовок, на несколько направлений. Вот то, что Йоко и Лена, это называлось Вавилон, они собирались в кафе «Аромат», оттуда куда-то ехали, с топом, гауя. И были такие хиппи, которые никуда не ехали. Они или выходили на стрит, это площадь Пушкина, или собирались дома, как диссиденты.
So I just want to preface what I'm going to say by explaining that the system itself had several departments within it. One department was called
Вавилон, кафе «Аромат».
It was called Babylon. Sure. It was in our hippie slang. It was called Babylon, and the point was to travel.
Пушкинская площадь.
No, that street. That's the second one, right?
Это Стрельцовый, а первое это Суворовский бульвар.
So we would go out into local cafes in Moscow, but the other group actually gathered at home and also in the streets.
И вот как раз на той же Пушкинской площади были такие известные хиппи, системщики, как Юра Солнце, Эдит Мамин сейчас в Канаде живет, Вася Лонгин, ну и так далее. Но я продолжу так, что мы как раз относились к системе стритовой, не вавилонской.
So it was in the Pushkin Square that there were some famous hippie guys like Yura Solnce and Yura Solnce. But I actually belong to another group. I belong to the group the Streeters.
На стриту была такая система, интересная, очень называлась система АС. Это было как спорт, пройти улицу Горького, это называлось, и наоскать, то есть набрать денег как можно больше у людей. Это был как спорт. Мы говорили... Мы представлялись, как будто, простите, пожалуйста, мы приехали из Сталина, у нас не хватает денег на второй билет, мы вам обязательно вышлем, но, конечно, никто не высылал, и теперь за это очень стыдно.
So we try to have fun and to challenge ourselves. And the challenge that was typical for our group was to follow for several blocks along the Gorky Street and collect as much money as we could. How did we collect money? We would address people, passerbys, with an accent, as if we came from Estonia. And we would say, we are visitors in your city. Would you please give us some money because we can't get back home? Now, of course, some people did give us money. And now that I think about this, I'm very embarrassed.
В общем-то, но это самые смелые, и некоторые были такие умельцы, как Гарик Прайс у нас был, даже статья была в «Комсомольской правде», он мог наоскать на джинсы, это джинсы были дорого тогда, пройдя по стриту, он мог набрать столько денег, как зарплата советского инженера.
One of our high achievers was so famous that there was even an article in one of the newspapers about him. He was so successful that he could collect as much money as would earn an engineer in the Soviet Union within 1 month. And that was, but the point was, of course, not to make money, but to collect enough money to buy a pair of jeans. And he could do that too.
Because we just spoke about jeans, in fact that's a really good transition to our next person, who in fact was a hippie much later herself, but was married to one of the most eminent hippies of the very first hour. And in fact the tailor and maker of all of the clothing you see here, except for that jeans here, but all on the mannequins. And he did not only tailor, but he felt that every single item, every single button on a hippie clothing should have a meaning. Not only like what it says about the hippie, but also what it says about the process of tailoring. For him, the process of tailoring was as important to hippie identity as the actual result. And she's going to tell us a little bit about these amazing clothes that we can see here.
Когда он делал одежду, для него было важно не просто показать стиль одежды, он считал, что каждая пуговица, каждый штрих одежды означал что-то.
Моего мужа звали Владимир Баптист. Он познакомился с хиппи в 1971 году, выйдя из дурдома. И у него такая интересная была судьба. Он был не только хиппи, но и монахом в экуменическом ордене Сан-Религии.
My husband's name was Vladimir Baptist, and Zen Baptist, and he met his first in 1971 after he had left the mental institution. In the mental institution.
Of course, that's where you met.
That's where he met them.
He
was a monk.
И он ездил по Советскому Союзу, хиповал, и в то же время у него была такая христианская миссия, весть христианства там, разным церквям.
He traveled around the Soviet Union, but also in addition to being a hippie, he had also a religious mission. He wanted to bring the gospel to the churches around the Soviet Union.
Он не принимал наркотиков, он не пил, и для него было очень важно творчество. И его творчество, оно воплотилось вот в одежде.
He did not drink alcohol, he did not use drugs. For him, what was most important is artistry and creativity. And so this is how he expressed himself.
У него была такая идея, что хиппи должен быть автономен от мира, по минимуму зависеть и ничего не брать. И полностью себя обеспечивать своим трудом, своими руками.
His idea was that the hippie was to be completely independent from the world, self-sustaining, self-sufficient, not to accept anything from the world.
Но он шил очень много и рисовал много эскизов хипповой одежды и самой одежды. Он одевал всю свою семью, детей своими руками и также делал заказ. Московских хиппи ему заказывали одежду.
He sold clothing. He did clothing for all his family, for his children, and also for other people who would commission him to do it. So he also was a painter.
Он выделял несколько таких этапов эволюции хиповой одежды. Первый – это когда эклектика, маскарад. Да? Здесь один стиль, там другой стиль, смешения.
He would break the hippie style of clothing into several phases. One phase was the eclecticism. So one style here, another there, they're all together, it becomes eclectic.
Сюда же относится такой способ изготовления одежды, как переделка военной одежды. Да? Он брал военную форму, униформу, ну не он, а они, да, хиппи тех лет, могли покупать тесьму, орденские ленты, да, нашивать, переделывать, ну как бы переворачивать военную одежду хиповую. Такой вот один из вариантов.
So within this category of eclectic clothing, there was also the subcategory when they changed the military clothing into hippie clothing. So they would take all the ribbons, all the colorful ribbons, and they would make them into hippie elements. That's how they flipped the system from the military to the hippie.
Вот следующий такой вот этап, это когда человек брал цивильную одежду, там, какая она была, и делал из нее хиповую, предположим, вот штаны он расклешал, вставлял на них линии, да, и вот вносил в нее хиповость. Это следующий этап развития одежды.
Another phase or compartment within that hippie clothing was when you took civilian clothing and you would just add something. So for example, you would take a pair of pants and you would cut them and put the little, and you make them, you would make them like split bottoms exactly.
Ну и такой высший пилотаж – это шить самому, полный самострок, да, самострок по-русски. Он считал, что шить может каждый человек, он не имел никакого образования, но при этом шил очень хорошо, без выкроек.
Of course, for him, the highest level was to make the clothing all by yourself. He didn't believe that a tailor would need any special education or skills. He took it as an act of creativity. He himself never had any formal education as a clothing maker, but he believed that that's how it should be done.
И у него было особое отношение к тканям, из которой шилась одежда, то есть принцип не покупать, принцип так называемой дохлой кошки. Это те вещи, которые никому не нужны, там, на помойке или отдали. Он разрезал эту одежду, и ткань использовал для изготовления новой вещи. То есть полностью вот, да, такое вот самообеспечение. Вот эта накидка сделана вот таким способом.
His point, his philosophy was that this kind of clothing could not be purchased. The principle was the principle of the dead cat. In other words, whatever you can find, whatever scraps of fabric you can find anywhere, you can collect it and make an eclectic piece of clothing. For example, this is how this piece of clothing was made.
So obviously we have two more last questions and I'll then open the floor because I think there will be many questions to everything. But tailoring really was quintessential hippie self-expression in many ways, and I do want to draw your attention to the flag we have made. It was made originally by Ophelia, who unfortunately cannot be with us because she died 20 years ago. But that was a flag made for an exhibition to express hippie identity in its purest. And one of the symbols you see there is a poppy, because of course poppies had a very important part in Soviet hippie life. It basically was the equivalent of LSD in the Western hippie culture. So there are several people here who can say something about poppies. Do you want to start?
There's not much to say. That was kind of factory. Could be made out of the poppy.
Well, what did you make out of the poppies?
Basically morphine. You want to have a thin one? There is a long way to go to make pharmaceutical stuff. But you could get about close to between 8 to 10% of morphine and whatever you're doing, and that's quite satisfactory, believe me.
Hippies were very good tailors. sailors, but also very good brewers, and there were many other things one could make out of poppies, but I leave that to discussion maybe later on in the garden. And actually we'll have turn to our last participant, who is actually a younger generation, because one of the interesting things about Soviet hippies was that they didn't die out, unlike Western hippies which dispersed by the mid-1970s. Soviet hippies were still going strong in the late 80s and even early 90s. And Amanda is a representative of that generation. She also speaks very good English because she's been living in the UK almost ever since. She left a conflict-ridden Russia, but before that, the hippies politicized during perestroika, and it changed slightly in their outlook. If before they were always running away from politics, when perestroika happened, they had their views. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I think James Joplin said freedom is just another word for not enough to lose. And frankly, it was quite similar to Soviet hippies as it was to the hippies in the West. So everything you have heard here, like people trying to find themselves in their crafts, people trying to find themselves in drugs, in travel, in this and that, it was just testing the boundaries of the universe around them, trying to find their place in it. For us, like Juliane said, perestroika started just about the time when we were playing into disobedience as children. Why we were doing that? Because the system around us, the Soviet system, was telling us what we have to do, literally from the point when we were starting school. We had to do things their way, and that's exactly why we weren't doing things their way. This disobedience just coincided with perestroika, which was a promising kind of change in the society, and we saw an opportunity to do our hippie revolution, which hippies in the West didn't do in the 60s because, well, they didn't have perestroika. But all we could do is to do it through the arts, through the political demonstrations, through joining various groups like the Border Sons and a number of others who started in trying to promote amongst hippies. But ultimately, when changes did happen, we realized that the establishment took over, and we knew how to promote the change, but we didn't know what to do with it once it happened. So our revolution, our political sort of views became something which went back inside of us. Again, some it was drugs, some it was immigration, some it was something else. For us, we realized that we can change the world by dealing on a personal level with people we meet. The important thing about being a hippie is that you live and let live. And when people don't understand that, no matter how flamboyantly they dress as people, they're not hippies. So basically we're trying on our own level, wherever we are, around the world, Soviet hippies, Western hippies, we met them, they're exactly like us. We're trying to change the world even now by being who we are, because what a great freedom can you achieve than being who you are. And by accepting people for what they are, you encourage them to actually analyze what they want to be, how better they want to be, because everybody deep inside wants to be a better person. And I'm still exploring myself. I know that everything is an illusion. Money, happiness, success, position, gender, whatever. Everything is an illusion. And that's something which I'm still exploring. I encourage people I meet to do that. And I'm sure lots of other people on different levels do exactly the same. And that's what you like.
So, you can see that there are many stories to be told, and it's really a shame that we have so little time, but sometimes it is interesting to, first of all, of course, look back after many years is what we are doing now, and of course what happened last year with sort of 50 years of the Summer of Love, and think there's been a re-evaluation going on about sort of what did hippies give to the world in general, and for the Soviet Union, it's still sort of, people are still trying to grasp what did it really mean that this movement existed. And I have my last question actually goes to not a Soviet hippie, but an American hippie, and he has a link to the Soviet Union he didn't know existed, because he made a people's book in 1971 in San Francisco, which I think came out in only a few hundred copies, if that. But one of these copies traveled all the way in the luggage of some unknown tourist to Leningrad, and was picked up by a local hippie who liked it very much and decided he was going to do something similar. And you see the result of this hippie book by Levina Zaitsev in the two vitrines, sort of in the middle. And there's another people's book that's made by a hippie called Greg from Lvov, who made a very similar hippie book. But my question to John McCleary, the author of the original hippie book, is how is it for you to have learned in these last few days that there were Soviet hippies who imitated your book and who were inspired by people like you?
Mind blower. I honestly didn't have a clue until about 4 weeks ago, that the book had made it to Russia. I'm not at all surprised that they had the foundation for a hippie there already, because all poignant and good ideas pop up all over the world at the same time. They are created by literature. Music is a very big movement, way to pass on information. But hippies are curious, and they don't take every word as rote. They say, maybe it's not the way that they was telling us at this point, so let's find out whether or not it really is true, this religion, this politics. Maybe there's another way to live, and most of the hippies that I know travel a lot because of the curiosity.
Question authority.
What's that?
Question authority.
Western authority.
Questioning authority was...
Maybe that's the moment that the floor is coming to us to open the floor. And what are your questions? Shall I go around with the mic? You can. What would you like to ask?
Actually, all my questions were answered. But I just want to say how much it means to me to know now. My father came here from Russia, first generation born American. I had no idea that as I was evolving as a hippie, a beatnik, and then a hippie, going through all this stuff, that there were people in my father's country who were doing this. It means a great deal to me to be here tonight, to hear your stories. Thank you.
Maybe you translate with the microphone so that everybody can hear it. Will you translate so that all people can hear?
I only translate.
Yeah, use the microphone.
So what was the question again?
Use the Russian speaker.
What was the question?
The question was just to say how much it means to see that they existed.
Мне очень важно, люди, чтобы существовали на самом деле, потому что на первом очередь что-нибудь сказать в ответ на это?
Мы тоже очень рады, что мы еще существуем.
We are also very happy that we're still alive.
I have a question. Maybe it was answered and I missed it, but I will just, maybe somebody will just repeat the information. To what extent American literary tradition influenced Soviet hippies? And I mean Kerouac, Burroughs, and Ginsberg. And can you name some Soviet writers who we can consider hippies and hippie writers as well, and the representatives of maybe beatnik or hippie culture? Я могу сразу перевести свой вопрос на русский язык. Как вы считаете, повлияла ли американская литература, битническая, хиппи-литература на советскую, русскую традицию повлияли такие писатели, как Kerouac, Берроуз и Гинзбург на советских хиппи. И можете ли вы назвать среди советских представителей тоже именно литературного хиппи и хиппи-движения?
Я полагаю, что да, конечно, американские отцы-основатели повлияли. Вот,
Вот эту литературу, это печатали в журналах советских. Я в архиве Володи видела вот эти листки журналов иностранной литературы, да, вот это все сохранялось, переплеталось в форме самых дат, передавалось по рукам и читалось. И еще у кого-то был доступ там, в отдел иностранной литературы в библиотеках, и тоже все копировалось, часто даже переписывалось вручную, если это было запрещено, да, и сам издата ходила по системе. Хиппи были очень образованные и мейнстрим культурные в Советском Союзе.
Yes, I would like to say that the influence was huge. American literature was very popular, and I remember in my husband's archive seeing separate sheets of paper. Sometimes they were torn out of magazines, where sometimes they were published, and sometimes they would get them from the library. Certain people in the Soviet Union had special access to foreign literature in the library, not everybody, but certain people. And it's those people who would take out that literature, those books, and they would make photocopies of them, which wasn't easy because photocopy machines were not available. But they would make them, and they would bind them and make little books out of them. And those little books would travel around, were passed from one to another. And it was called samizdat, self-publishing. It was all illegal, it was all underground, but the influence was huge.
So I can answer the second part of your question. Unfortunately, there are no real Soviet hippie writers, insofar as one of the things Soviet hippies defined themselves against were the dissidents, and they actually chose not to express themselves via the words, but very much via their clothes and their appearance and art. And it was only in the later years that much writing was done. We now have realized that a lot of people wrote very good poems, but it was all very underground and nobody could get published, so it's only now coming up, and some of it of course got lost forever.
Я хотела бы, возможно, я добавлю предыдущий вопрос. Просто вопрос насчет Керуака, Бероза и его их влияния. Среди наших друзей тоже хиппи есть двое переводчиков, которые переводили несколько книг Керуака Бероза. Это Виктор Коган, он сейчас не является хиппи, но он был когда-то хиппи. И очень знаменитая известная наша певица Умка, хиппи-певица Аня Герасимова, она перевела книги, переводила Керуака Бероза, Бикстур она переводила, еще что-то переводила. Она должна была быть здесь, но не успела получить визу. Так что наши друзья переводили эти книги.
Another source of influence from Western literature was, of course, self-made translations. Among our circle were people who were translators. One of them was hippie at that time, Victor Kogan. And then there was a wonderful singer woman, Anna Gerasimova. She was supposed to be here with us, but she couldn't make it. But those two people were part of our circle, and they translated from English into Russian.
Alex, questions? Otherwise I would say, okay, one more question, and then I think the hippie fest will continue with some music. And of course you should feel free to come up and ask questions, and you can also have somebody, there are lots of Russian speakers here now, to get translation if needed.
Я слышу по-русски, насколько я знаю, погромче. Насколько я знаю, в Советском Союзе надо было на работу ходить. Как вам удавалось на ней ходить?
As far as I remember, in the Soviet Union, everybody was supposed to go to work. How did you live? How did you manage to live without going to work?
Вы знаете, мы вообще-то не ходили на работу. А если не ходили, то на такую. Поколение дворников, сторожей, я полагаю, вам известно, да, Гребчаков вещь, да? То есть дворники, сторожа, в котельной работали, были натурщики. Вообще не работали, потому что когда сняли статью за тунеядство, как это, то как жил. Хотели работали, хотели не работали.
Some of us worked and others didn't. And when the Soviet Union decriminalized not working, people just refused to go to work, and they just lived whatever anywhere could make money. But when we did have to go to work, usually it was our generation was the one that supplied all street sweepers, all night guards, where you didn't have to have any special clothing, or they were models. They would get undressed and work as models in the museum, in the art schools, where people would just need to draw naked bodies. That was one of the ways to make a little bit of money. But otherwise, we didn't work. We tried not to.
К примеру, что относится ко мне, я работал 8 лет натурщиком профессионально. Позировал, меня рисовали студенты в художественной академии. Я работал до мая месяца, а потом 4 месяца можно было ездить по Советскому Союзу автостопом. Это мне дало возможность, что милиция не могла ко мне придраться, что я не работаю. Но я работал, я 4 месяца гулял.
As far as I'm concerned, that's exactly what I did. For 8 years, I worked as a model. And I worked only 8 months a year, and then for the next 4 months I traveled around, and nobody, including the police officers, could say anything to me, nothing to me, because I wasn't unemployed. I did work, I just didn't work all the time.
И потом я устроился в театр оперы и балета, 84 год, и до сих пор 34 года на одном месте работаю, уже на пенсию иду.
And then I went to work for the Theater of Opera and Ballet, and that's where I started in 1984, and I'm still employed there. Soon I'm going to retire.
Были разные варианты, наверное, проще всего было художником, потому что у нас был ненормированный рабочий день, и я занималась гобеленами, то есть тоже можно было сделать заказ и потом отдыхал. Но, в общем, трудовая книжка, она лежала в комбинатах, там можно было устроиться. Вот. И вот я так работала, и в итоге, когда я хиповала, меня наградили медалью за трудовое отличие, за выполнение правительственного заказа. Вот. И теперь я стала ветераном труда и получаю повышенную пенсию.
As far as I'm concerned, the easiest way to make money was to be an artist, because you didn't have to go to work from 8 to 5. You could work at home or in the studio, and your day was not limited by 8 hours, and you could work as much as you could or as little as you wanted to. And this is what I did, and as a result, I was able to travel, and even while I was traveling, I was awarded an important medal, calling me the veteran of labor, and so now I'm a very important labor person.
One of the things Hippie did was endorsing Soviet slogans. That was sort of part of Hype. And of course, a lot of Soviet slogans were about work. And one of them was, better what you can do today, don't do tomorrow. And they reversed it and says, лучше завтра работать, чем сегодня. Better tomorrow work than today. And I think, under this slogan, we can now all go out and enjoy ourselves, and our work is done for today.
It's easy to say, don't do something tomorrow which you could do day after. And I have a little bit of, diversion of opinion about, what the third system been.
Подробности, да, подробности. Завтра занимаемся с этим.
We can go in the computer later.
Но что я хочу сказать про работу, в нашей семье я была кормилец семьи, потому что вот Лена сказала, что художникам было легче, но мой муж был художником, но ему не нравилось нигде работать, ходить на работу, поэтому он предпочитал работать сторожем.
So speaking of employment and work, I can tell you that in our family, I was the provider. Even though my husband, as you mentioned, he was an artist too, but he didn't like to go to work. So as a result, he was satisfied working as a night guard. Basically, when you are sleeping on the job, you didn't have to do anything, just be there and sleep. And that's what my husband did, and I was the provider.
Он хотел просто больше свободы.
He just wanted all the freedom he could get.
As you can see, the people here don't want to stop working. Except if there are any urgent questions. I know that the band is waiting for us, so I think we should stop working and go out and celebrate.